Hey everyone, it's Jim
and Charles
from Valves and More, an online vintage tube store. And today in Tube Lab number 281, we're going to do the Unknown Tube episode number 1. And today we're going to look at the 115N0 or NO 30. Wow, that's a mouthful.
We'll get to what that is in a minute.
We would like to also thank everyone who participated in our big summer sale. Y'all almost overwhelmed us last weekend, but with total concentration, dedication, and hard work, we managed to get all the orders out on Monday. The summer sale ends on Sunday, June the 28th, so that's only a couple of days away. I'm going to put the sale code below this video, and Charles will flash it at the very end. And at the end of this episode, we're going to take a look at some more excellent vintage tubes that we still have good inventory for. But first, caution everyone, electronics and tube amplifiers can have very high voltages present, which can be lethal. Exercise extreme caution when working around them. Always consult a professional technician when in doubt. Well, this is the first of a series we'll be doing during the summer months, in which we feature different, lesser-known vacuum tubes. Some will be simply crazy tubes, like today. Well, maybe not today. It's sort of crazy. That have absolutely no application for audio, but are still interesting to look at and see what they can do. And we'll be taking a look at some lesser-known audio tubes that really should be given a chance. We've built a few kits around these unknown tubes that have turned out to sound simply amazing. Just because a tube isn't well known or popular or a lot of equipment has been designed for it doesn't mean it sounds bad. In fact, the opposite is often true. And best of all, those relatively unknown tubes are still available new old stock for reasonable money. If you can find them, of course, because a lot of sellers don't know that they've got tubes that people want or might want, so they don't list them. Okay, Charles, what have you got set up for us today?
Okay, well, this is a weird one, and it's not something that you would typically have inside an audio amplifier, unless if maybe you wanted to have it in the power supply. So let me explain here. What we have here is actually a very early time delay relay. There's much more modern versions of these out here with programmable microcontrollers on them, but this is a whole lot simpler, and by simple, I mean it's just got a heated bimetallic strip, and it takes 30 seconds for that strip to move over and make a contact. And all you have to do is give it AC wall voltage for that to happen.
So the tube number 115 probably designates the mains voltage.
Back whenever it was 115 volts.
And the NO would stand for?
Normally open.
And the 30 would be?
The time delay, 30 seconds.
Okay, that's perfectly logical. So I presume there's a whole series of these suckers.
There's so many of them. We've got a 9-pin version somewhere around here. I should have probably grabbed it for the screen. And you'll find these all over the place. Old industrial equipment will use these. You'll find them in HVAC units. It's really interesting seeing octal sockets on those kinds of things. And oh, here we come. Here's a 9-pin.
And you can see it looks very, very similar. It's just in a 9-pin envelope.
And I think that one's actually a 6-volt one, so probably meant to work off of what would have been a heater filament tap.
Cool. Okay, so what have you got rigged up here, Charles?
So this is the simplest way to demonstrate one of these. We have pins, I believe, 2 and 3.
We actually have it here on our computer. So,
yep. 2 and 3. So these are the heater connections. So these are actually wired up directly to our Variac. And so this is going to be live with mains voltage when we turn that on. So don't try this at home. And over here we have a 3-volt input coming from our benchtop power supply. and we have the output from the relay coming over to an LED here with an appropriately sized resistor. So,
and the other side of the LED is connected to the ground return path of the power supply.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this on because it's going to take 30 seconds for it to click, and you're going to watch that relay slowly slide over. And these are really neat mechanical devices. They're really simple, they're reliable, they'll work long term.
It's moving.
And
it's moving. It's almost there. Can it do it?
And this is just a really neat way of providing a soft start or a delayed start. And
bing,
there we go. We have a complete circuit. Isn't that neat? So these are really cool devices. I don't know if there's a lot of practical uses for them these days because there's so many different relay technologies out there in modern versions, but maybe it would be neat to have something with this on there.
Yeah, and modern relays are in much smaller packages unless they're switching higher current.
Yeah, a little less fun though, but this is, a good reminder of how vacuum tubes back in the day were responsible for most major electronic components inside devices. You were using them for relays, you were using them for photo detection, you were using them for amplifying, of course.
And this is a simple relay. I remember years ago, the very first kit that I ever built was a Heathkit preamp that had a lot of switches and circuitry and inputs and outputs. I think it had 2 tape loop monitors. It was insane how complicated it was. But it checked all the boxes for anybody who wanted a good preamp. And it had a complicated relay in there that at the time I didn't even know what it was. But now, thinking back, it had a whole bunch of contacts in there. It was almost like the equivalent today of a basic chip. You could wire it up to do a whole bunch of things.
Mm-hmm. A whole bunch of different poles, yeah. All right. Now, so this is the first example of one of the weird tubes that we're going to show off. Maybe next week we're going to show you something that can be used in an actual audio circuit. But let's go take a look at some other off the beaten path tubes that you can actually run in a 6SN7 spot with the right adapter.
Okay, we'll be right back. Can we watch that light for a little longer? I love lights. We should put more lights in the kits.
Maybe.
Okay, see you soon. Okay, well, we're done looking at bright red LEDs. Charles, you've got a whole bunch of miniature 9-pins all laid out. What the heck have you got going on here?
Yeah, for a while now, we've been slowly building up our stock of the 6GU7s again. And these, of course, are a close equivalent of the 6CG7, which is just the 9-pin version of a 6SN7. Isn't that fun?
And if you put it in a simple adapter, you can do basically a direct plug-in to any 6SN7 socket. And these adapters are made for us by the manufacturer, and they're just great. We rarely have any problems with them. Good connectivity. In fact, I think I've given up on checking connectivity because we have some very fine ohm meters for measuring extremely low resistances, and I keep getting back zeros, as in perfect connectivity. So
they're well made.
Yeah.
And these are just slightly lower gain tubes than the 6CG7s and 6SN7s, so they're great if you have a little bit too much gain in your system. They're really interesting sounding. They're a bit different from the 6CG7s, a bit different from the 6SN7s out there.
But sonically, they typically have an extremely clean, clear profile. A little less of the warmth of the 6SN7, a lot more clarity and resolution. So if you're an audiophile and you're getting a little tired of the warmth of the 6SN7 tubes, and that's fine, you can completely change up your preamp or your driver tube by just swapping these in, and you'll have essentially a completely different sound.
Yeah, and there's a nice big variety of them available. We've got American-made RCAs and Sylvanias and GEs, which are all going to be tariff exempt, which is really great for our American customers.
Yeah, now a lot of these are rebranded. So this one's rebranded Amperex of all things, and it's a GE, but its matching pair has actually got an RCA brand on it. And so never presume when you see a label that, oh, okay, I know exactly what this is. You have to look at the actual construction details to verify. It helps sometimes with a good label in a box, but a lot of tubes were rebranded. I've estimated perhaps as many as 50% of all vintage tubes ever produced were rebranded.
Especially nearing the end of the second tube era as well, whenever factories were starting to shut down and production lines were closing up and manufacturers still wanted to sell some tubes. Like RCA buying from GE is a good example here.
Yeah, now you've actually got some Japanese versions of this tube as well.
Yeah, we have an NEC here that's a branded as Admiral, which was a, I think they made home audio equipment in the US, didn't they?
Well, and in Canada, they made home radios and things like that.
And then we have an actual Hitachi branded one, and it is a Hitachi. You can actually tell by these little cutouts on the micas here. That's the easiest way to identify.
That's a giveaway. That's pretty unique.
As far as I know, they're the only 9-pin manufacturer that did that, and makes them stand out right away, and they're all great tubes.
Yeah, so it's really an excellent option to change up the sound from the venerable 6SN7, and the adapters are not expensive. So and before we go, we actually have some of the highest demand power tubes that we sell. We've specialized in these tubes for years.
And we actually just managed to get another quad into the store.
So, and given the fact that we have a couple of days left of the big summer sale and you can snatch them for 15% off, this might be a good moment to show them off. So let's clear the decks and we'll be right back with some really nice looking Mullards. Okay, well, you probably guessed it. This is one of our favorite, if not our favorite, I think it's our favorite, EL34. This is the second version that Mullard manufactured, called the XF2. They were all made in Blackburn, UK. There are some cousins that Philips / Mullard / their other plants did make, but this is the tube that I think made Mullard famous for power tubes, and probably had the highest production until the RFT came along and essentially copied it of any EL34 to that point in time anyways. Mullard made them for a little over a decade in a period in which they controlled the patent rights to the EL34. So they rebranded them for a huge number of other tube manufacturers who wanted to have an EL34 in their stable or in their catalog, and only had one choice at that point in time, and that was to buy them from Mullard. And Mullard would rebrand them for everybody, including big amp manufacturers. So this is a new old set quad that are all G labels, which is really unusual. They're all testing right bang on at new old stock. Here's an example, and this is a good used quad that's testing a little lower, of course, but the chrome is excellent on these. And this one's branded Dynaco, and Dynaco was a kit amp manufacturer. They also sold assembled kits the same way we do today. And they sold a lot of stuff. They advertised in the back of an awful lot of electronics magazines and audio magazines back in the day in the 1960s. And I still see Dynaco amps showing up used for sale. And sometimes they show up with their original old quad of XF2s.
Looking extremely tired.
Yeah. So you can really tell a brand new power tube's hours by just looking at the chrome. And you can see we've got a massive amount of chrome here, and we have no degradation on the edge. We're going to see a tiny little bit of fading, and that's normal. If the tube is 50 years old or 60 years old, it's going to have a little bit. Some of that might have dated back to originally when it was flashed off in an induction heater when it was manufactured, but a lot of that's probably just simply age because the tube is maintaining a vacuum for 50, 60, 70 years. This U set, you can actually see the line where the vacuum, where the chrome Gettering
has receded slightly.
Yeah, as it maintained the vacuum. So this is still very good chrome for a good used tube that's testing good. In fact, this is excellent. A lot of power tubes, just modern tubes and vintage tubes. And in fact, I was just chatting with a gentleman who was really interested in the very first generations of the 6550 and the KT88, simply because he was fascinated with the idea of having a power tube that dates back to the 1950s, early 60s. That it's like recreating an historic moment. The problem is a lot of those very early power tubes were not as well made as the later ones, for the simple reason that the manufacturing techniques, the engineering, understanding, know-how,
the vacuum pumps
were huge, hadn't yet improved or caught up to the technology itself. The same way early computers and later generation computers really changed dramatically as the technology matured. And it's not a very good analogy, but you get sort of the idea. So in many cases, the early tubes, the very early triodes, are fabulous. They sound amazing. They tend to be overbuilt with more chrome Gettering because they just didn't know at the time how much they actually needed. But with early power tubes, because the suckers have to really work hard, they would expire a lot sooner than you would think they should, and it's just a thing. And
unfortunately, you see a lot of what are supposed to be new old stock GEs and Tungsol 6550s out there that are white on the inside.
Yeah, they're
lost their vacuum.
Yeah, they're cooked, and if they've been in service and they're still basically operational, if you look at the Gettering on those used tubes, you'll see right away that they are done. Electrically, they might actually function, but if you see the Gettering almost gone, you could probably plug it into your amp and it'll be gone in a week or a day or an hour. So be really careful about getting into very old power tubes when it comes to vintage tubes. Even if they're new old stock in the box, trying to find those tubes matched would take at least half a case, 25 tubes. So almost nobody's selling those tubes and claiming that those really old power tubes are a matched pair or a matched quad are really telling you the truth, unfortunately. So be very, very careful about that. And luckily, the Mullards are a very long-lived power tube. The technology had improved and matured by the time they started making them. The very first ones rolled off, I think, around 1960, and the last one came off the assembly line, I think, in January or February of 1972. And then they started making the XF3, which was a very different tube. And we think they had to compete with their competition because their patent right had expired.
And so RFT was pumping out tubes, Sylvania was pumping out their 6CA7, Svetlana was pumping out their EL34, and so they had to make them a bit cheaper and faster.
Yeah, so we think they actually changed over to a riveted system from a welded plate system because they could automate it. So anyways, these are in the store. Now, caution, there is only one quad of good used and only one quad of new old stock, and you're looking at them. So when they're gone, they're gone. We used to have a bin full of XF2s.
Yeah.
And I mean a bin. So we'd have hundreds of these tubes, and we'd have lots and lots of matched quads and pairs. These days, we have one of each.
Yeah. Now they'll continue to slowly trickle in, but it seems like the days are gone where we were able to restock relatively easily, even if it took some time.
Yeah. This is Jim.
And Charles.
Signing off. Cheers, everyone.